The Grand Chamber of the Galactic Council was the largest room ever built by any species in the known universe. It stood at the heart of Nexus Prime, a planet that had served as the capital of galactic civilization for 50,000 years. 12 massive seats rose in a circle around a central platform, each one carved from stone taken from the homeworld of the species it represented. The ceiling stretched so high that clouds sometimes formed inside the chamber. Today, every seat was filled. Ambassador Park Yuna stood on the central platform with her hands bound by glowing energy shackles. Her diplomatic uniform was torn and stained with blood. Her face carried bruises from the beating she had received 3 days ago when the Melkari security forces had dragged her from the human embassy. But her eyes remained clear and steady as she looked up at her judges. She was 47 years old. She had served as humanity's voice among the stars for 15 years. She had negotiated trade agreements, prevented 3 wars, built friendships with species that had never trusted outsiders before. She had dedicated her entire life to proving that humanity deserved its place in the galactic community. None of that mattered now. Hi, Arbiter Vathan, of the Melkari Dominion, rose from his seat. He was tall and thin, with pale blue skin and 4 eyes that never blinked. His voice echoed through the chamber as he read the charges against the human ambassador. Park Yuna of Earth stands accused of crimes against galactic order. She has engaged in espionage against member species of this council. She has spread dangerous ideas among subjugated populations. She has taught the forbidden concept of individual freedom. 2 species that have been properly placed under the protection of their betters. For these crimes, the punishment is death by fire. Yuna did not react to the sentence. She had known it was coming from the moment the Melkari had arrested her. The council had been looking for an excuse to punish humanity for years. Humans were too independent, too stubborn, too unwilling to accept their place at the bottom of galactic society. The council wanted to send a message. They had chosen her to be that message. Does the accused wish to speak before sentence is carried out? Vathan asked. His 4 eyes showed something that might have been amusement. Yuna lifted her chin. I do. The chamber fell silent. Even the council members leaned forward slightly, curious about what the doomed human would say. You call it a crime to teach freedom, Yuna said. Her voice was calm and clear. You say that some species are meant to serve and others are meant to rule. You have built your civilization on the backs of slaves who never chose their chains. And you are afraid of humanity because we do not accept this. We look at your perfect order, and we see only cruelty wearing a mask. Vathane's 4 eyes narrowed. Enough. I am not finished, Yuna continued. You think that killing me will frighten my people into submission. You think that if you make an example of me, humanity will learn to be quiet and obedient like all the others? But you do not understand what we are. You do not understand what you are about to awaken. I said enough. Vathane's voice thundered through the chamber. He gestured to the guards standing at the edge of the platform. Yuna kept speaking even as the guards moved toward her. My people will come for you. Not because I ask them to. Not because they have to. But because that is who they are. They will burn everything you have built. And they will not stop until every chain in this galaxy is broken. The guards forced her to her knees. A ring of fire generators rose from the floor around the platform. Yuna felt the heat begin to build. She had one final duty to perform. The small transmitter hidden in her tooth was still active. She bit down on it, opening a channel to the human monitoring station 3 systems away. Everything she saw and heard was being recorded and sent home. The flames rose around her. The heat became pain, and the pain became everything. But Park Yuna had made a promise to herself in the dark cell, where she had spent her final nights. She would not give them the satisfaction of hearing her scream. She kept that promise. The transmission reached Earth 17 hours later. It arrived at the headquarters of the United Terran Defense Force, where it was immediately flagged as priority 1 and sent to the office of Admiral Kong Doyan. Doyan was 63 years old. He had served in the fleet for 40 years, rising from a young pilot to the commander of humanity's entire military force. He had fought pirates, negotiated with hostile species, and kept the peace through 100 crises. He was known for his calm judgment and his steady hand. He watched the recording of Yuna's execution alone in his office. He watched it only once, from beginning to end. He saw the flames rise. He saw her face remain steady even as her body burned. He heard her final words, transmitted in a whisper that the council's microphones had not caught. "Tell Admiral Kong. Tell him I didn't scream." Doyen sat in silence for a long time after the recording ended. He thought about Yuna, whom he had known for 20 years. He thought about her husband and her 2 children, who were waiting for news on the colony world of New Busan. He thought about the message that Council had tried to send by burning her alive. Then he stood up. He walked out of his office and down the corridor to the central command room, where 200 officers monitored humanity's military forces across 1,000 star systems. Every officer in the room turned to look at him as he entered. They had all seen the transmission. They all knew what had happened. Admiral Kung Do-yeon spoke 7 words that would change the history of the galaxy. "Wake the fleets. We go to war." No one in the room questioned the order. No one asked for clarification or expressed doubt. Every officer turned to their station and began the work of mobilizing the most powerful military force humanity had ever assembled. The Council had wanted to teach humanity a lesson about power. They were about to learn that they had been the students all along. The Council received word of humanity's mobilization within hours. They had expected anger. They had expected protests and demands for justice through proper diplomatic channels. They had even prepared for small raids against border outposts, attacks that could be easily crushed and used as further proof of human barbarism. They had not expected 400 warships moving in perfect formation toward the Melkari border. "High Arbiter." Vathan called an emergency session of the Council. The 12 species debated for 6 hours about the proper response. Some argued for immediate negotiation. Others insisted that humanity must be taught another lesson. In the end, they chose to show strength. The combined fleet of the Galactic Council numbered over 2,000 vessels. Ships from all 12 member species gathered at the border, forming the largest armada assembled in 300 years. The Council's military commanders felt confident. They outnumbered the humans 5 to 1. They had superior technology developed over millennia. They had fought and won 100 wars against species far more powerful than these newcomers from a small blue planet. Fleet Commander Cho Minji stood on the bridge of the Terran flagship Unbroken. She was 39 years old, small in height but fierce in spirit. She had earned her rank through skill and courage, not politics or family connections. She looked at the tactical display showing the enemy fleet and felt no fear. "They think numbers will save them," she said to her officers. "They do not understand what they are facing." The Council fleet arranged itself in the traditional formation used by galactic powers for thousands of years. The largest ships took position at the center, protected by rings of smaller vessels. It was a defensive formation designed to absorb attacks and wear down enemies over long battles. Minji did not give them time for a long battle. The human fleet hit the Council armada like a hammer striking glass. There was no warning volley, no demand for surrender, no attempt at negotiation. The humans came in fast and hard, targeting command ships and communication relays with surgical precision. The Council commanders were confused. This was not how civilized species fought. There were supposed to be rituals, exchanges of threats, opportunities to display power without actual destruction. War among the galactic powers was almost ceremonial, careful dance where both sides understood the rules. Humans did not dance. Humans did not follow rules. Humans came to destroy. Within the first hour, the Council fleet lost 300 ships. Within the second hour, they lost 500 more. Their formations broke apart as captains panicked and tried to flee. The human ships hunted them down with cold efficiency. By the 6th hour, the battle was over. The debris of nearly 2,000 Council vessels drifted through space. The human fleet had lost 47 ships. They did not stop to collect survivors from the enemy wreckage. On Earth, General Yoon Sun-woo watched the battle footage from the command center in Geneva. He was a ground forces commander, not a naval officer. but he understood what he was seeing. The rules of galactic warfare had just been rewritten in fire and blood. He had spent the past 3 days preparing the directive that would guide all human military action going forward. He called it the Una Doctrine, named after the woman whose death had started this war. The document was simple and direct, written in language that every soldier could understand. No occupation, no prisoners, no mercy. They wanted fire. We will give them fire until the stars themselves go dark. Some officers questioned the harshness of the doctrine. They worried about what humanity would become if it abandoned all restraint. Sun Wu listened to their concerns and then dismissed them. They burned a woman alive for teaching people to be free, he said. They have been enslaving entire species for longer than humanity has existed. We are not fighting a war of conquest. We are fighting a war of justice. And justice does not negotiate with those who burn the innocent. President Buchanan stood before the United Nations Assembly in New York. Every seat was filled. Every camera in the world was pointed at her face. Across human space, on colonies and stations and ships, billions of people watched and waited. Hannah was 52 years old. She had been a lawyer before entering politics, known for her calm voice and her sharp mind. Today her voice was not calm. Today it carried the weight of a species pushed beyond its patience. 3 days ago, the Galactic Council executed Ambassador Park Una by fire. Her crime was teaching enslaved peoples that freedom exists. Her crime was believing that all thinking beings deserve dignity and choice. For this, they burned her while she was still alive. They made her family watch. They thought it would frighten us into obedience. She paused. The silence in the chamber was absolute. They called us young. They called us primitive. They said we had not earned our place among the stars. They looked at humanity and saw only a species to be controlled, to be used, to be kept in its place through fear and violence. Hannah's hands gripped the podium. Her voice rose. They were wrong. They have awakened something they do not understand. Humanity does not bow. Humanity does not break. And when our children are murdered, humanity does not forgive. She turned to face the cameras directly. Knowing that her words were being transmitted on open channels to every corner of the galaxy, to the species of the Galactic Council, I say this. You wanted to teach us fear. Instead, you have taught us that your civilization deserves to fall. Every empire you have built on the backs of slaves will crumble. Every chain you have forged will be broken. We will not stop until the very concept of your council is nothing but ash and memory. She took a breath. Her final words were quiet, but carried more weight than everything that came before. You killed our daughter for speaking the word freedom. Now we will write that word across the stars in your blood. This is not a war you can win. This is not a war you can survive. This is the end of everything you are. Transmission ended. Across the galaxy, species that had lived under council rule for thousands of years heard the human president's words and felt something they had almost forgotten how to feel. They felt hope. The Melkari Dominion had ruled over 40 star systems for 10,000 years. They had conquered 7 species and kept them as slaves, workers, and soldiers. They believed their empire would last forever. They believed they were chosen by the universe itself to rule over lesser beings. Admiral Kang Doyan proved them wrong in less than 6 months. The human fleet arrived at the Melkari homeworld on a clear morning. The planet's defense grid was the most advanced in the galaxy, built over centuries to withstand any attack. It fell in 4 hours. The orbital stations that housed the Melkari elite came down next, burning like meteors as they entered the atmosphere. But Doyan did not glass the planet. He did not drop bombs on cities or kill millions of Melkari civilians. That would have been too easy, too quick. Instead, he did something far more devastating to the Melkari way of life. He freed the slaves. Dropships landed across the planet, carrying human soldiers and something even more dangerous, teachers. They went to the slave quarters and the work camps and the breeding facilities where the Melkari kept their property. They broke open the gates and told the people inside that they were free. 7 species had served the Melkari for thousands of years. They had been born into chains and had never known anything else. Many of them did not even have words in their languages for the concept of freedom. The humans taught them. "You are not property," the soldiers said, again and again. "You belong to no one. You can choose your own path. And if you want revenge against those who kept you in chains, we will give you the tools to take it." The Mulcari ruling class watched in horror as their entire society collapsed around them. Slaves who had been obedient for generations suddenly rose up. Factories stopped working. Food production halted. The empire that had stood for 10,000 years began to eat itself from within, Captain. Im Jin-ho led the strike team that captured High Arbiter Vathin. They found him hiding in a bunker beneath his family estate, surrounded by guards and enough supplies to last for years. The guards surrendered without fighting. They had seen what happened to those who resisted the humans. Gin-ho was a young officer, only 28 years old. He had joined the military after watching Yuna's execution. He had volunteered for the most dangerous missions because he wanted to personally deliver justice to those responsible for her death. He stood over Vathin and looked into the aliens for eyes. The High Arbiter who had read Yuna's death sentence now trembled with fear. "You will face trial for your crimes," Jin-ho said. "But not a human trial. We are taking you to the people you enslaved. They will decide your punishment." Vathin's screams as he was dragged away could be heard throughout the estate. Far from the front lines, intelligence officer Shinyanji fought a different kind of war. She commanded a team of specialists who had spent months cracking the Council's communication networks. They had gained access to archives dating back thousands of years. Records that the Council had kept hidden from the galaxy. The truth was worse than anyone had imagined. The Council had not simply allowed slavery, they had designed their entire civilization around it. They had deliberately kept certain species in poverty and ignorance to ensure a steady supply of workers. They had destroyed cultures, erased languages, and murdered billions to maintain their power. Yoonji broadcast these records across every communication channel in the galaxy. She sent them to neutral worlds that had refused to take sides in the war. She sent them to species that had considered the Council to be legitimate rulers. She sent them to the slaves who were even now rising up against their masters. "See what they have done," she said in the message that accompanied the data. "See what they truly are. The Council speaks of order and civilization, but they have built their order on bones and blood. They have no right to rule anyone." The effect was immediate. Species that had remained neutral suddenly found themselves unable to stay silent. Worlds that had traded with the Council cut their ties. Former allies turned their backs on the 12 ruling species. The war was no longer humanity against the Council. It became something much larger. It became the galaxies oppressed against their oppressors. Former slaves picked up weapons and joined the human advance. Rebel groups that had fought alone for centuries suddenly had powerful allies. Admiral Do-yoon watched as the reports came in from across the galaxy. Planet after planet was falling, not to human soldiers, but to uprisings led by freed slaves and inspired rebels. The Council's power was collapsing faster than his ships could travel. He thought about Yuna, the words she had spoken before her death. She had said that humanity would break every chain in the galaxy. He had thought it was just defiance, the brave words of a dying woman. Now he understood that it had been a prophecy. The other Council species tried to negotiate. They sent ambassadors offering peace treaties, promising reforms, begging for mercy. Do-yen refused to meet with any of them. General Yoon Sun-woo sent the same response to each offer. "You had peace. You burned it alive." One by one, the great powers of the galaxy fell. The Melkari Dominion, the oldest and strongest, was the first, but they were not the last. Each empire that had participated in Yuna's execution, each species that had voted for her death, faced the same fate. Their slaves were freed. Their leaders were captured. Their power was broken forever, and throughout it all, the humans kept pushing forward. Their eyes fixed on the ultimate target, Nexus Prime, the capital of the Council. The heart of galactic civilization, the final battle was coming. Nexus Prime had stood at the center of galactic civilization for 50,000 years. It was the oldest continuously inhabited world in known space, home to wonders that had been ancient when humanity was still learning to make fire. The grand chamber where the council met was considered sacred ground by species across the galaxy. It fell in 3 days. The human fleet arrived with overwhelming force. 600 warships surrounded the planet, blocking any escape. Behind them came transport vessels carrying soldiers, equipment, and the freed slaves who had volunteered to help liberate the capital of their former masters. The Council's remaining defenders put up a fierce fight. They knew that if Nexus Prime fell, the Council would cease to exist. Ships that should have surrendered instead charged directly at the human lines, hoping to take at least one enemy vessel with them as they died. It made no difference, fleet. Commander Chominji directed the battle from the bridge of the Unbroken. She had learned much in the months since the war began. She had learned that the Council's military was designed for show, not for actual combat. She had learned that species, who had always been the masters, did not know how to fight when they became the desperate. Our brave, her second-in-command observed as another Council ship exploded on the display. Bravery without skill is just a faster way to die, Mingi replied. Continue the advance. I want our troops on the surface within the hour. The landing was brutal, but short. Colonel Anhaniel led the first wave of soldiers into the capital city. She was 41 years old, a veteran of dozens of campaigns. Known for her tactical brilliance and her refusal to waste the lives of soldiers under her command, the streets of the capital were chaos. Council loyalists fought from every building, every rooftop, every underground tunnel. But they were fighting alone. The slave populations that had served the capital for generations had risen up the moment. The human ships appeared in the sky. They blocked roads, sabotaged communication systems, and guided human soldiers through hidden passages that the Council did not know existed. The oppressed know secrets that the oppressors never learn. Hanyol said as a group of freed workers led her battalion through a service tunnel directly into the government district. The Council built this city on slave labor. They never imagined that knowledge would be used against them. The Grand Chamber itself was defended by the Council's elite guard, warriors from all 12 species who had dedicated their lives to protecting the seat of galactic power. They fought with desperate courage, knowing that surrender meant facing the justice of the billions they had helped enslave. Haniel's forces broke through their lines in less than 2 hours. She walked into the Grand Chamber with her rifle still hot from firing. The massive room was empty now, the 12 great seats abandoned. Most of the Council members had fled hours before, escaping on private ships as their guards died to buy them time, but not all had escaped. In the chaos of the evacuation, some had been too slow. Haniel's soldiers found them hiding in secure rooms and secret passages, cowering behind locked doors that human weapons opened easily. Colonel Hanyul climbed the steps to the central platform, where Park Yuna had been executed. The stone was blackened from the fire that had killed her. She pulled the Terran flag from her pack and drove its pole into that scorched ground. For Yuna, she said. For all of them. Admiral Kong Do-Yen arrived on the planet 6 hours later. The fighting was over by then, the last pockets of resistance crushed. He walked through the ruined streets of the capital city, past buildings that had stood for thousands of years, past monuments to Council power that now lay in rubble. He entered the Grand Chamber alone. His officers wanted to accompany him, but he refused. This was something he needed to do by himself. He walked to the center of the chamber, to the platform where the flag now flew. He looked at the 12 empty seats rising around him. Seats that had held the rulers of the galaxy for longer than humanity had existed as a species. Then he looked down at the scorched stone beneath his feet. "We came for you," he said quietly. "Just like you knew we would." He knelt and placed his hand on the floor on the spot where Yuna had died. His fingers touched the blackened stone, and for a moment he simply stayed there. Honoring the woman who had sacrificed everything for an idea. "I wish you could see this," he continued. "I wish you could see what your words started. You taught them freedom, and they killed you for it. But the word spread anyway. It spread to every slave camp in every prison world and every forgotten corner of the galaxy. They could not kill the idea. They could never kill the idea. He stood up slowly, his old joints protesting. There was still work to be done. President Buchanan transmitted new orders to fleet. Commander Cho Mingi pursued the fleeing council members to the edges of known space. No hiding place would shelter them. No species would protect them. The leaders who had ordered Yuna's death would face justice, no matter how far they ran. They thought they could escape, Hannah said. They thought that if they ran far enough, fast enough, we would eventually give up and go home. They still do not understand what they are dealing with. The hunt began. Human ships fanned out across the galaxy, following trails of desperate council members. Some were caught within days. Others managed to flee further to the lawless regions beyond civilized space. But everywhere they went, they found that their money was worthless and their names were cursed. The galaxy had turned against them. Former allies refused them shelter. Species they had protected now closed their ports and armed their defenses against them. The Council had spent thousands of years building a network of power and influence, and now that network existed only to hunt them down. General Yoon Sun-woo received reports of council members captured by the very species they had once ruled. Justice was being delivered across the galaxy, not by human soldiers, but by the people who had suffered most under council tyranny. They created this, he said. Every act of cruelty, every chain they forged, every life they destroyed. It all comes back to them now. The old order was dying. Something new was being born. 2 years had passed since the flames consumed Ambassador Park Yuna in the Grand Chamber. 2 years of war, of liberation, of the complete destruction of an order that had ruled the galaxy for 50,000 years. The Galactic Council no longer existed. Its members were dead, imprisoned, or hiding in the darkest corners of known space, hunted by the very species they had once enslaved. Now, it was time to build something new. Representatives from 47 species gathered in the rebuilt Grand Chamber on Nexus Prime. They came from worlds that had known nothing but slavery for thousands of years. They came from planets that had remained neutral during the war, and now wanted to be part of what came next. They came from humanity's colonies across the stars, ready to help create a future worth fighting for. President Buchanan stood at the podium where the High Arbiter had once pronounced death sentences. But she did not stand alone. Beside her were leaders from a dozen different species, beings who had been considered property just 2 years ago. We gather here today not as masters and servants, Hannah began, not as rulers and ruled. We gather as equals, united by a common belief that all thinking beings deserve freedom, dignity, and the right to determine their own fate. The chamber fell silent as she continued. The old council was built on fear and chains. They believed that order could only come from control, that peace required someone to hold the whip. They were wrong. True peace comes from justice. True order comes from respect. And true strength comes from standing together as equals. She lifted a document from the podium. This is the Charter of the Stellar Commonwealth. It guarantees the rights of all species to govern themselves. It forbids slavery in any form forever. It creates a council where every voice matters, where no species stands above another. It is not perfect. We will make mistakes. But we will make them together, and we will fix them together. One by one, the representatives stepped forward to sign the charter. Each signature represented a world, a species, a people who had chosen hope over fear. When the last name was written, the chamber erupted in cheers that could be heard throughout the city. Admiral Kang Do-yeon did not attend the signing ceremony. He had retired from military service 3 months earlier, passing command of the fleet to Cho Mingi. War had consumed 2 years of his life, and he was tired of death, but he had not retired to rest. He had work to do, work that would matter long after the last battle was forgotten. The Yuna Institute opened on Earth 6 months after the charter was signed. It stood on a hill overlooking the ocean, a place of learning and training for diplomats and peacekeepers from every world in the Commonwealth. Do-yeon had spent his own fortune to build it, and he dedicated the rest of his life to running it. Ambassador Park taught enslaved peoples the word freedom, he said at the opening ceremony. She died for that word. Now we must teach the next generation how to protect it. Not with weapons, but with wisdom. Not with war, but with understanding. Students came from across the galaxy. They learned languages and cultures. They studied history and philosophy. They practiced negotiation and conflict resolution. And at the heart of their education was a simple truth that Una had understood better than anyone. Peace was not the absence of conflict. Peace was the presence of justice. A journalist asked Do Yen if he regretted the war, if humanity had gone too far in its response to Yuna's execution. He considered the question carefully before answering. The council burned a woman alive for teaching others to be free, he said. They had enslaved billions for thousands of years. They built their civilization on cruelty and called it order. When we destroyed them, we did not create suffering. We ended it. The chains that bound 100 worlds are broken forever. How can I regret that? He paused, and his voice grew quieter. I regret every soldier who died under my command. I regret every life lost in the fighting. War is never good, even when it is necessary. But some things are worth fighting for. Freedom is worth fighting for. Una knew that. She knew it better than any of us. 5 years after the war ended, a statue was unveiled in the Grand Chamber. It stood in the exact center of the room, on the spot where Una had died. The artist had captured her perfectly, standing tall, her chin raised, her eyes looking toward a future she would never see. The inscription at the base was simple. She taught them the word freedom. Humanity taught them its cost. Visitors came from every corner of the galaxy to see it. Former slaves touched the stone with trembling hands, remembering the lives they had lived before a human woman dared to tell them they deserved better. Children born after the war listened as their parents explained who Una was and what she had sacrificed. Her husband and children attended the unveiling. Her son, now a young man, spoke briefly to the crowd. My mother believed that ideas cannot be killed, he said. She believed that a single word, spoken in darkness, could change the universe. She was right. The council thought they were silencing her when they lit the fire. Instead, they set the galaxy ablaze with hope. The new stellar commonwealth was not perfect. No government ever is. There were disputes and disagreements, old grudges and new conflicts. Some species struggled to adjust to freedom after generations of slavery. Some humans worried that they had taken on more responsibility than they could handle. But the Commonwealth endured. It grew stronger with each passing year. The principles Una had died for became the foundation of galactic civilization. Slavery became not just illegal but unthinkable, a horror from a past that no one wanted to return to. Humanity had changed as well. They were no longer the young, unknown species that the Council had dismissed as primitive. They had proven themselves in the fires of war. They had earned their place not through conquest but through liberation. Species across the galaxy looked to Earth with respect and gratitude. General Yoon Sun-woo wrote a book about the war in his final years. He called it the Una Doctrine, and it became required reading at military academies throughout the Commonwealth. The final chapter contained a warning that he hoped future generations would never need to hear. Humanity does not seek war. We do not take pleasure in destruction. But we have proven what we are capable of when pushed beyond our patience. Let this be remembered by anyone who would harm our people or threaten the freedom we have won. We did not start the fire that killed Park Una, but we burned everything the Council had built in response. Some called it excessive. Some called it cruel. I call it truth. Humanity does not start wars, but we finish them. Absolutely. On the 10th anniversary of Yuna's death, Admiral Doyen made his final visit to the Grand Chamber. He was old now, his health failing. He walked slowly to the statue and stood before it for a long time. We kept our promise, he said quietly. Every chain is broken. Every slave is free. Your word spread to every corner of the galaxy. I wish you could see what you started. He reached out and touched the stone hand of the statue. Rest now, Ambassador. The stars are free, and they will stay free forever. He died 3 months later, surrounded by students from the institute he had built. His last words were spoken with a smile. Tell Yuna, I'm coming. Tell her we won, the galaxy remembered. And it stayed free.